What's up, YouTube? This is Iris, and today we're going to do a quick review on Star Wars The Last Jedi. Star Wars The Last Jedi is a very polarizing film. People either loving it or hating it. There are over 80,000 people who have petitioned so far to have it stricken from Star Wars canon entirely. When I walked out of the theater with the people that I was watching it with, I heard several people saying that it was the best Star Wars film ever, even better than Empire Strikes Back. So, popular opinion is very much split on this one movie. Now, there's a variety of reasons why that could be. Today we're going to look at a few of them. But before we get started, this is going to be a very spoiler-heavy episode. And since the movie is still currently out in theaters, if you haven't seen it yet, I highly suggest you go check it out. It was well worth the money in my opinion. Also going to go ahead and give my rating on it now. Just so you know. Overall, I found the film really enjoyable. I don't know if I feel like it was the absolute best Star Wars movie, but it was definitely up there for me. I can definitely see myself seeing it many, many more times. So, is it better than Empire in my opinion? I don't know. But it is definitely up there with it. For me. However, I fully understand why it isn't that way for everyone. So, if it isn't your cup of tea, that's fine. We're all entitled to have our own opinions. For me, I really loved it. I'd probably give the film a 9 out of 10. Okay. So now let's get into the actual review part of this review. Once again, filled with spoilers, so if you haven't seen the movie yet, you might want to stop watching now. The Last Jedi is a movie that subverts expectations. We've been trained through cinema as a whole, and Star Wars in particular, that these stories play out a very specific way. This movie plays with that notion and throws it all out the window. Okay. First up, let's take a look at the character of DJ, the kind of dashing rogue, the Han Solo or Lando Calrissian type of group. Now, typically in these stories, when you get to the end, he has a change of heart and goes, oh wow, I've been fighting for the wrong side. I don't need to just be in this for myself. I need to actually join up with the resistance and fight against the evil empire. That is not what DJ does at all. He very much turns on the rebels and causes a great many casualties for the rebels. The resistance, I guess they're called now. That's unusual. We haven't seen that in Star Wars before. Usually the guy who's just kind of doing it for the money ends up turning and helping the crew at the end. And this is even played with a little bit when he uses the brooch to short out the computer in Snoke's ship and then gives it back to Rose. That's unexpected. You don't expect that because it shows a change of heart. It shows that that he's starting to come around to the resistance side of thinking. So the betrayal at the end seems really hard-hitting. It subverts your expectation. Next thing is Snoke. Snoke has been built up as this big villain throughout the entire thing. We've been waiting for it. We've been watching it. This is the next Emperor. This is who's going to be the third act main villain. We are going to get to the end of episode 9, and he's going to be the one who's going to be fighting against Rey. Except he isn't. Halfway, maybe a little over halfway through the movie, Kylo Ren betrays Snoke and becomes the Supreme Leader. That was so unexpected, I don't think anybody could have predicted it. Except for when it was actually happening. But it's really amazing that they would have set up this great villain, and then you get to the end and all of a sudden he's not even going to be in the third movie. He's had such a minor role, and it's just setting up Kylo Ren as one of the main villains. This also means that the third story arc isn't going to be about Kylo Ren betraying Snoke to team up with Rey. which is, I think, what everyone was expecting. We were expecting a redemption story arc. We were expecting Kylo Ren to follow the same story arc as Darth Vader. And now that he's not doing that, it made a lot of fanboys mad. Because now, you either have to have just a one-on-one redemption attempt, or Kylo Ren has to be defeated. It has to end with Kylo Ren, Ben Solo, dying. That's insane. Now, like I said, there is still a way that they could do the whole redemption thing, but it's crazy to think that they've even put that on the table as being a possibility, that maybe there is no true redemption for Kylo. I have my own opinions about that, and don't necessarily believe that that's the way they're going to go, but I'm not going to fill this with fan theories. Next up on the subverting expectations side of things is Luke. We see him at the end of The Force Awakens looking at Rey like it's time. Well, this time around, when we start out the movie, when we get to Luke and Rey and their whole story arc, he wants nothing to do with it. Now, there's been a lot of division on how Luke has been portrayed. Would Luke really turn his back on the Force? Would Luke really just sulk away after one defeat? And I understand where those people are coming from. It does seem out of character for Luke from everything that we've seen in the other movies. However, there's one thing that I think a lot of people don't take into account. And that is that this wasn't just a random student. This was Ben Solo. This was his nephew. This was his blood. And not just that, but it was the son of his sister and his best friend. Even before he knew that Leia was a sister, he was really close with her. I mean, they'd been friends for years before the realization hit him that she was related to him. So the fact that he lost two of his best friend's son to the dark side, and he holds so much of the blame for that on himself because of a bad decision that he made, especially when you consider the fact that it could be seen that that decision was fueled by the dark side. He might have been trying to do the right thing, but he went about doing it the wrong way, and that led to the creation of Kylo Ren. Looking at it that way, I can see why he would have turned his back on the Force, on the Jedi Order, on all of it. I understand why a lot of people don't like that. Honestly, I wasn't a huge fan of this story arc with Luke, but I accept that it's a realistic possibility. I'm not sitting here going, oh, Luke would never do that. No, I can see why he would do that. It's very realistic, very reasonable. I also want to go ahead and say, while this doesn't really go in with the whole subverting of expectations, I thought this was one of Mark Hamill's best performances ever. This was a powerhouse performance by Mr. Hamill, and he just knocked it out of the park. The amount of depth and emotion that he had to portray, even in scenes where he didn't say anything, it was astounding. It was like watching magic happen before your eyes. This was the best performance I've seen probably from anyone in a Star Wars movie. It was amazing. So, my hat's off to you, Mr. Hamill. That was some top-notch acting. And while I know you may not have been a huge fan of how they took Luke's character, like I said, I'm not the biggest fan of where it went either. I couldn't imagine anyone else bringing it to life other than you. The last thing that I'm going to hit on where it talks about subverting expectations is that the whole side quest with Finn and Rose fails. That's the first time we've ever seen that in a Star Wars movie. It was so unexpected and came so far out of left field that we didn't think there was any way that it could happen. I don't think I've ever seen a Star Wars movie where they go off on a 1,000,000-to-1 odd long shot and don't succeed. Oh, they stole the plans for the Death Star and got them out of the Empire's hands? Yeah, that worked. Of course it did. oh, a small group of rebels make it onto the Death Star and escape? Of course. Yeah, why wouldn't that work? Oh, the Death Star is about to just blow up Yavin 4? Yeah, sure. A small group of rebels can destroy the whole Death Star. No problem. We just keep seeing, and I know all those examples came from Episode 4, New Hope, but we see over and over and over again, these rebels are fighting against these huge odds that should be absolutely impossible. They were lured into a trap in Return of the Jedi, where the Emperor knew they were coming, prepared for their attack, and they still ended up, the rebels won. We always see these super long odds, and 99% of the time, rebels still come out on top. That doesn't mean they don't come out with casualties, but they still end up succeeding. So seeing this whole story arc, where these people are on this mission to try and save the rebel fleet, and it doesn't work, it was mind-blowing. Up until the very end, you're sitting there going, well, how are they going to get out of this? How are they going to get out of this? How are they going to end up turning off the tracking device? And in the end, they don't. I understand that the whole story arc there doesn't really feel like it goes anywhere, because nothing is accomplished, at least that you can see from the visual perspective. But it's a very important, very powerful part of the movie. It's the first time that we've seen the rebels actually lose anything. And this movie is all about the rebels losing, and losing hard. Now, admittedly, I will say that a lot of Rose and Finn's story arc does tend to run on the dry side. The Casino Planet is exceedingly boring. They could have come up with something much more interesting to do with that time. But at the same time, it does kind of fit into the story they were telling. It's just, you kind of wish the story part right there was a little more exciting. And it also set up the further subversions with DJ. But overall, the whole failed mission was extremely important. People go, well, why didn't you just cut that whole part out? It's important to the story arc. It's important to the story arc of Rose. It's important to the story arc of Poe Dameron. Without that failure, he doesn't understand what he's costing the rebels at this point. It is important to his character arc that the mission happened. But I can understand why everybody hates that side of the plot, and really wish a lot of it had been cut. Personally, I love Rose and Finn's interaction. I love everything concerning them except for where they were. If they had put them in an Empire stronghold or some weird swamp planet or something like that, I think that could have been a much more interesting set piece. It probably wouldn't have had the emotional impact that the Casino Planet had, where Rose is talking about, you know, the slaves and the animals and the cruelty, and how all these people came from this money by supporting the Empire. But overall, I didn't hate it. And I do think it was important to the overall plot of the movie and the character development. Like I said, the Casino Planet was just so boring. I wish they had done something better with it. That's all I have to say about the subversion of expectations. Everything else I have to say is just kind of thoughts and opinions, and maybe a few theories about different aspects of the movie. A lot of people will complain about how Holdo's plan, she should have told somebody. You know, it should have been like, oh, well, this is what's going on. I would like to point out that throughout the entire time that I was watching this, I very much thought that she was thinking, we might have a mole in our midst. It's never said out loud. I wish she had have said that, because that would have cleared up a huge number of plot points. Plot holes. Excuse me. but she keeps everything tightly guarded. She doesn't share it with anybody. Everything she's doing is in secret, and you either have to follow her orders or don't. It definitely has her coming off as kind of the bad guy in all of it, but if she thinks that somebody on the inside is sending out information to the Empire, it's very understandable why she would do it that way. Now, one important thing to note, some people are like, well, why didn't she know that the Empire were tracking them through some sort of device? If you remember, even Rose and Finn were surprised by that. This is super cutting-edge technology. This is something that they had never seen before, which I think is great that we're introducing new technology into Star Wars that isn't fighter ships. You know, it's not new walkers, new Rebel fighter ships, although all of that stuff is amazing as well. The end battle with the little skate ships and the new version of the walkers on Crate was very interesting, very well done. I like the visual of it. It's good to see new technology being introduced that isn't, you know, these battleships. Because we see new battleships all the time. It's good to see something else being introduced. Next up, my opinion on the Porg. I thought they were actually kind of funny. I was going in expecting to hate them. Like a lot of people, I kind of feel like certain aspects of Star Wars kind of got toned down as the years went on. Star Wars and Empire are such dark, gritty stories, and then you have the Ewoks from Return of the Jedi and all these bright, colorful cast members in the prequels, and it was definitely fun to see something that's supposed to be cute and has some actual genuinely funny moments, like when Chewbacca is roasting one and eating it, and the Porg are just sitting there like wide-eyed, like, oh. That was funny. And Chewie's sitting there like feeling bad about it. That actually infused real humor into the movie. It wasn't Jar Jar just slamming his head against something or getting his tongue stuck to something. I didn't feel like they were shoehorned in where they didn't need to be. I thought that their appearances were funny and they really served a purpose in the movie in bringing a little bit of levity to a pretty dark film. Yoda's introduction in the movie, Yoda being in the movie at all was just absolutely amazing. I wasn't expecting him at all, but I was so happy when he was on screen. There were several points during the movie, the first time I saw it, where things would happen and people would burst out into a round of applause, and Yoda showing up was one of those moments. It was just amazing. And he's still doing the teacher role. He's still trying to instruct Luke on how to be better, how to grow. So even with him being gone, he's still trying to pass that on to Luke. I thought that was wonderful. Another thing is the X-Wing misdirection. They very clearly show on Octu, I'm probably butchering that pronunciation, on the planet where Luke is. They very clearly show Rey looking down into the water and seeing an X-Wing. Very reminiscent of the X-Wing in Swamp in Empire Strikes Back. This is a wonderful bit of misdirection. I absolutely love this. Of course, we know at the very end of the movie, Luke is an astral projection. He isn't actually even there fighting. There are subtle clues to that sprinkled throughout. First, of course, being that when he steps on the sand, or the salt, it doesn't turn red like it does for everyone else. But still, that little bit of misdirection there, making you think he just raised the X-Wing and flew off to help Rey and Leia and Finn and the rest of the Resistance. It leaves the ending that much more powerful when you realize what's actually happening. Leia's Force use did kind of come out of nowhere. We haven't really seen her use the Force at any point in any of the movies, except for very brief psychic connections to Luke in Empire and possibly Return. So her actually having the ability to propel herself through space and get back on board the ship after the bridge is destroyed is unexpected. That being said, I'm going to go ahead and point out that Yoda and Obi-Wan do discuss the fact that she is Force sensitive. Even Luke talks to her about it. So that way, she's aware that she does have that Force power. And we as an audience are aware of this also. Even though we haven't seen it, we know she's Force sensitive. She may not have ever put in the effort to develop that, but she does have it within her. Also, we've seen that people who may not have the most extensive Force training can use the Force in certain situations, especially in life or death situations. For example, in Empire Strikes Back, when the Wampas got Luke, you see he's struggling to use the Force to pull the lightsaber to him. But knowing that his life is in danger, he does get that sudden burst and can pull it to him. This is with very little Force training, so there is a precedent for it. The ending was unique because for the first time in the series, we saw both sides of the battle in tatters. The Resistance has pretty much been wiped out with only a handful of survivors remaining. The First Order now has a power struggle going on between General Hux, who has the military experience but no power to back it up, and Kylo Ren, who has all of the power, the Force and everything, so he's pretty much untouchable, but doesn't have the military experience. So overall, I thought the movie was really good. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Like I said, I see where a lot of people were coming from. Some of the things that were set up didn't really pay off. They were Chekhov's guns that weren't used. And the Rose and Finn side plot did get dry at points, as well as Luke's whole story really kind of feeling strange to people who feel like it wasn't really how Luke would have reacted. But overall, I felt it was a solid entry in the series. It wasn't what I expected out of it in any way, but that didn't make it bad. It was still very enjoyable. It's just they didn't take it where I thought they would. And I'm not going to dock a movie because, oh, well, it isn't what I expected it to be. A movie should take me somewhere where I don't expect. It should take me somewhere where it still makes sense. There's logic behind it. But I can't predict every move. And I feel like, in a lot of ways, Star Wars kind of became by the numbers for a little while. So actually seeing it revived in this breath of fresh air where I don't know what's going to happen, where everything is kind of up in the air still and it's just this new and exciting experience, I'm happy for that. I'm happy to see that coming back. So, as I said earlier, I'd give this movie a 9 out of 10. It's not perfect, but it's still a really good movie. Probably one of my favorite Star Wars movies. I won't say it's replaced Empire yet, but it's really high up there. So, that's me. I hope you've enjoyed this review. Peace out, YouTube.